Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. Hello, and welcome back to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. So this is going to be a really raw episode. Generally, I do a lot of scripting for my episodes. I do quite a bit of research as well as fact checking to make sure I'm getting everything correct. I really want to make it clear, and it takes time to figure out the order to say things in order to make concepts clear. But today I'm going off script. I'm just going to talk from thoughts that I've had recently. And these are thoughts around money scarcity. I hope it would comfort you that even as a life and money coach, that I still get thoughts of money scarcity. And a lot of them has been coming up recently due to circumstances in my life. So last week, and I am recording on February 22nd, 2024, there's going to be a delay before this is released because I have several podcast episodes batched to go out. But so last week, mid-February, I was essentially let go from my job. To give a little bit more background, I currently work as an oculoplastic specialist part-time. And I live in Cleveland, Ohio, in the east suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio. And I actually fly to work. I work in central Illinois, and they actually cover my travel there. So it's a locums-like job, but it's not actually a locums job. It's a W-2 job. I'm a W-2 employee. I am in one office. I do go to different places to operate. I am an employee of this job, and it wasn't necessarily hired to be a short-term job. So when I was hired on, there was someone else who was already doing this, and they had been doing this since 2019. They flew up from Florida, and they were coming in every other week for 3 or 4 days at a time. And so I basically started coming every other week, the weeks they didn't come, and I would fly there Sunday evening, work Monday through Thursday. If I could operate Friday, I would operate Friday, and then I'd fly home on Friday. If I was operating, I might fly home on Saturday. This is a private practice that is run by physicians, and I really enjoy working there. I have great staff support. I'm surgically very busy. The patients are great. I really like the other physicians in the practice. I've hung out with them, had dinner with them. And I really thought that this was something that was going to be my last physician job, to be quite honest. Then last year, so I started this job in the fall of 2022. So last year in 2023, kind of earlier in the year, I think probably around March, that other physician who was coming up from Florida, he had to have a urgent surgery. So he had to cancel a bunch of times that he was coming up, as well as canceling a bunch of his ORs. And then he actually has his own private practice in Florida. And ultimately, he actually ended up selling his practice to private equity. His wife was his practice manager. She didn't want to do it anymore. I don't know all his reasons, but after selling private equity, he has to stay on and now work for the private equity so he can no longer come to central Illinois. And so he left. And I absorbed all his patients, all the patients he had scheduled for surgery. And so now I suddenly started booking out close to a year after a few months, just because there was just so much volume, so much need. And I was really booking out for surgeries. I wasn't, my getting to see me in clinic wasn't, so many months. Maybe it was a month or two for a new consult. So we started problem solving, looking for ways to add more OR time. And starting January this year, I actually got a second OR day at another location. So all this time, I had been really focused on just providing great care for my patients. I was getting great feedback from the partners. They enjoyed having me. I thought everything was great. Then in January, I was at, they wanted to do a lunch meeting to talk. And, we had done these touch base meetings before, so I didn't really think much of it. I was brought into this meeting and basically they first offered me to come full time. But of course, I have my reasons for wanting to stay in Cleveland. My husband's here, his job's here, he enjoys his job. He's a tenured high school teacher. I have friends here. This is where I do my real estate investing. And I really like working part time. It gives me time to work on my coaching business. It gives me time to create these podcasts. It gives me time to travel, which is my great passion. And so I really didn't see full time as being an option. So that's when everything kind of fell apart. So they basically told me that if I didn't want to come full time, that what their plan was to offer the other person who comes periodically. So there is a third person who comes 2 to 3 days a month and not even every month. So not very much. He drives down from Chicago. So they would offer him to come full time, which they already expressed. It was very unlikely he would do so. He has his own private practice up in Chicago. And if neither of us come full time, then their plan was actually to shut down the oculoplastics division of the practice. So at the time of that meeting, honestly, I was trying to hold it all in and not start crying. I totally wasn't anticipating this whatsoever. And part of it was that they had interviewed someone in December who would potentially also come on part-time. And in trying to decide whether to make this person a job offer, they essentially looked at this whole part-time type of program and decided that they didn't want to continue with it anymore. So I asked some questions during the meeting. I don't even remember what I asked. Uh, and it was a lunch meeting, so I actually had to go to clinic and see patients afterwards. So it was everything I could do to just get through the rest of the day. I then spent some time processing. The next day before I flew out, I went and talked to the CEO and asked some questions, got a few things answered. And then I later on basically just asked if I could meet with all the partners. And at this point, there are 7 partners within the practice. So there was actually a physician's meeting coming up, a doctor's meeting, and it would be during the week that I was there. So usually with these doctors' meetings, all the doctors, the employees, and the partners meet together over dinner. And then after dinner, the partners stay to discuss whatever partner business, and those of us that are not partners leave. So the idea was I would just stay for the beginning part of the partners meeting so that I could talk to all of them. And that was the meeting that happened last week. Basically, at that meeting, I brought up that I wanted to try to find something that worked for both myself and the practice. And I started bringing up some points. By the way, I should say that when they initially approached me, they said it had nothing to do with my performance or anything about my patient care or me as a person, because obviously they wanted me to come full time. And again, at this meeting, the words actually used were, "We love you, we love having you, but this is a business decision. This is purely a financial decision." And yet they didn't even want to talk about how we can make oculoplastics more profitable. I thought I was going to get to go into a discussion and a negotiation, and I found that it was full-time or not at all. And they were no longer willing to pay for the travel. Full-time didn't have to be 5 days a week. It could be 4. I could work Monday through Thursday, but they did want me to come to Peoria and live in Peoria, which to me was a hard stop and not something I was willing to do. So sorry, that story kind of took a while, but I think it was necessary to just relate how my money scarcity thoughts recently have come up, because this is a job where I actually really felt well compensated. I've previously been at a job where I did not feel so well compensated. I felt respected. I felt like I was treated well. And, I really gave back. I worked hard. I saw as many patients as we could handle. We kept tweaking the schedule. I was often the last physician to leave at the end of a clinic day. I really felt like I was putting my best foot forward and giving my best. And I was hearing that I was appreciated, and I really didn't think something like this would happen. But again, we know that physician jobs are really not so secure as we thought they were. I think the COVID pandemic really taught that to a lot of us physicians. So, of course, now I'm looking at no longer having a job after we do a wind down process. And I even quite sure how long this wind down process is going to be. At the end of that meeting last week, I asked how much longer I had, and the managing partner said 3 months. And as we know, 3 months is not a lot of time to find a job. And then after you find the job, you still have to get licensed if it's a different state. You still have to get credentialing at any hospitals or ORs or ASCs. And you have to get on insurance plans. And that all really takes quite a bit of time. For this job, I signed the contract in May. I got my Illinois license in July, and I started seeing patients in October. So some of the thoughts that I noticed started coming up were thoughts of not having money, of looking at my spending. And it went both ways. There was part of me that actually wanted to buy things that I may have been putting off or didn't really feel like I needed, but right now I have money, so maybe I should just get it. Of course, I'll always have the money as long as I don't spend it. So then there were other thoughts of like, no, 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 I shouldn't spend any money. I need to save as much money as possible because I don't know how long it is until uh, I get another job or accept another job, or my sources of money coming in are now insecure essentially, and so I should not be spending money. So it's interesting that how I noticed that both those things came up, me wanting to buy things and also me not wanting to spend any money at all. I think part of me wanting to buy things was also me trying to tell myself, oh, it's okay to spend money. But I also think there really was that part of me that's like, okay, I have money now. I don't know if I'll have money later. I've spent a lot of time coaching myself and really going over these thoughts and trying to pick apart these thoughts. And so this is just how it's coming in. We all have thoughts that just pop in our brain, and they may not be rational, they may not be realistic. And we don't have, we can choose whether or not we want to keep that thought. And so I really spend time being like, is this a thought that serves me? Is this a thought I want to keep? What's the underlying reason for this thought? Our brains want to protect us. There's a primitive brain that wants to protect us from harm. And so some of these thoughts are really just things to try to protect us. I also found myself reconsidering my upcoming travel. Again, travel is just a passion of mine. I love to travel. And I have a lot of trips planned for this year. In March, I'm going to a wedding in New York and visiting some family and friends over my husband's spring break. In April, I'm going to a women's physician retreat in Portugal, which that I've already paid for, so I'm definitely going. In May, I'm doing a mission trip to Honduras, which I have not actually paid for. I have not purchased the plane tickets, and then we actually pay to be in the program. We pay for our own expenses, but I've fully committed to doing that trip, and so I'm going to go ahead and do it. And then in June, I have a 3-week trip planned to go to Croatia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Slovenia. And this was a trip that was originally planned for 2020, but got canceled due to the pandemic. And so I do really want to go, though that was a trip I was thinking, well, should I cancel that right now? The plane tickets are purchased and all the hotels are reserved, but the hotels can all be canceled with this much advance notice. And I could cancel my plane tickets and have United credit to spend on other plane tickets. And then the last trip I have planned for sure is that well, I shouldn't say for sure because I'm rethinking that, is going to New Zealand for my husband's winter break during the winter holidays. And part of that thinking process is that it is a lot more expensive to travel over the winter holidays. It's one of the reasons why we haven't actually gone to New Zealand yet, because really the best time to make best use of hiking, which is what I want to do in New Zealand, is going during their summer, which is our winter. And with my husband's job, it really means going over the holiday season, which is an expensive time to travel. Plane tickets are literally two, three times more expensive. And so, because of my doing well at my current job and having the time off, having all the vacation time essentially I want, I made the decision to go this year, last year. And now, knowing that I may not even have a job in December, do I really want to spend that money and commit that money that way? And I actually did buy the plane ticket to New Zealand on points, but I couldn't find any good ticket back on points. So I'm looking at actually purchasing the ticket, and I would purchase the ticket returning with Air New Zealand and then fly to SFO and then fly United back to Cleveland. So the flight from New Zealand, there's no way to get kind of a refundable flight. Their flights are refundable, but with a somewhat large fee attached. So I have not actually purchased that ticket yet. Though, I mean, we're still super far in advance, right? It's over 9 months until I would be traveling. I also thought, well, if I'm going to have time over the summer and my husband's off over the summer, that maybe we should even travel more, but change where we travel, go to a part of the world where it's a lot less expensive so that we could even spend more time there. So that's also a thought I entertained. And I would say that's probably not so much a money scarcity thought, though in order to make it work, my brain does say that we would want to go somewhere with a much less cost of travel. So when I look at my money scarcity, I also looked at what actions that I took out of that, right? One of the things I started doing right away was looking at our expenditures, looking at the spending plan, looking at what could be cut down, where could we cut back, how much of my husband's income and our investment income could really cover our basic expenses, figuring out what the minimum amount we really need to live on really is. I also started looking for jobs. I sent my CV out. I contacted recruiters. I contacted other places where I've been in contact with to try to work there. I do also do another locums job that is local to me in Cleveland. And while I don't love doing that job, it's a job where I basically take ophthalmology call, which I, who likes to take call, but it's only call. It's not actually clinic on top of that. So not quite so bad. It's more like playing Jeopardy or gambling where, I can get slammed or I can not get called at all. So I looked into getting more weeks of that job. I also noticed that I started looking at when I was looking at some of the past spending, I've invested heavily in business coaching for myself. And overall, I certainly don't regret that investment. But there are some programs where I was thinking, like, man, I wish I had the money instead of having done that program. And then I try to remind myself, like, what I learned from that program, what I got out of that program, how much I enjoyed being in that program. And even though maybe I haven't seen a direct return on investment from that program, I can't link that, oh, I made this much money in my coaching business because of having done that program. All of it is learning, all of it is building myself up and will hopefully pay out in the future. And of course, the loss of this job is not just about the loss of the income. I've realized it's a loss of a potential lifestyle. The job I have where I'm actually paid to travel somewhere else and I get to work every other week. And I can actually not work a week if I want to travel that week. For example, the week that the Honduras mission trip is happened to be the week that I would work. So we were able to change it so that I would work 2 weeks in a row and still be able to go to Honduras. And I've done that a few times with some other trips that I want to take. And so they've really been flexible with me. And there is that scarcity feeling that I just won't find anything that's nearly as good as this, that this was the best job possible for me. And there's nothing better than that. And having a thought like that really doesn't serve me because then when I'm thinking that, I don't actually look for other positions. I don't start thinking about, well, who else may be wanting someone like me, someone to come in and even if it's part-time, in order to unload some of the patient load? What are other areas of the country where they may have a hard time recruiting aquaplastics to come move and live there? And there's a lot of need in that area so that they would consider flying me out and having me work part-time like I did in Central Illinois. So anytime you find yourself in thoughts about scarcity, you want to kind of think about that. Like, how are those thoughts of scarcity actually preventing you from having an open mind to what is actually possible and taking action in order to find what's possible? I think one thing that helped is when I was really in those places of scarcity is really just redirecting my focus and going to what I call problem solving mode. But to be in problem solving mode, I have to believe that I can solve the problem and start brainstorming all the ways to solve the problem. And for me, that's not that hard of a switch. But if you find that a hard switch, then that's where maybe getting some coaching can really help you with that. Like I said, I get lots of coaching, not just business coaching, but personal coaching as well. I also just reached out to friends. I've had really a lot of people who've been very supportive, willing to listen to me for an hour or more and, you know, share their compassion, but also, get me out of any rut that I might be thinking at that time. I like to remind myself, like, we'll be fine. We have my husband's income, we have savings, we have our emergency fund, we do have investments and other streams of income. But then on another note, so one of those streams of income uh, threw in a monkey wrench. Sometimes when it rains, it pours. So I have a short-term rental and it is profitable. Then last weekend, I had a guest check in and she said that it felt kind of warm. So they went to the thermostat and the thermostat was blank. And so I had them go and trigger the circuit breaker because I figured, maybe the circuit breaker was triggered. But I think it came back on, but then just went blank again. And so I called heating and cooling service guys, the HVAC, to come. They couldn't come until Saturday morning. They came. They found some issues with the furnace, which they were able to fix, but they didn't quite understand why the thermostat kept tripping after they fixed the issue with the furnace. So then they recommend an electrician come out. Uh, the electrician came out on Monday. He really couldn't find any issues, but it seems like things are okay with that now. But there's actually two furnaces in my short-term rental, and in confusion, they went to look at the other furnace, not the one that was attached to that thermostat that wasn't working. And they found a gas leak, a natural gas leak from the furnace, which would cost $1,000 to repair. And that furnace was older. I knew that I already had a kind of plan that I would need to probably replace that furnace the next year or two. So then now I'm replacing that furnace. That furnace got replaced Tuesday. But in all these conversations, I had my cleaning lady, they're helping me out, having all these other contractors come in. And usually she texts me, issues that come up. But unlike my previous cleaner, I switched to this cleaner in September. I think she tells me a lot more when we talk on the phone and a lot less through text. And so because we were talking on the phone, she started letting me know things that she was seeing in the house. And one of those things she was saying, that the deck was looking a little rough. There were definitely some boards that were popping out and sticking up. And so then I got my handyman out there. And, there were definitely some boards he says are rotted and need to be replaced. He nailed down any boards, but he really said that there probably needs to be more major work than he can handle that would really need a crew, and I should start getting quotes and looking to have something bigger done this year. So I started doing that, and I also started researching what a deck cost is to replace. And just to describe further, my short-term rental has this huge wraparound deck. I calculated it out to be over or around 2,300 square feet of deck. It's a large deck and it's elevated. The cabin sits on a hill, so the front door is on the first floor, and the deck goes all around the first floor. But in the back, it's on the hill, so it's basically like second story and on the back, where the basement actually goes out to the ground level towards the back of the house. And I found that replacement of a deck can be $25 to $50 per square foot or even more. And it, depended, and having an elevated deck and certainly having all that square footage landed me more likely to be in a higher cost per square foot. Well, it being elevated and being a second floor was the reason for likely higher cost per square foot. So if I'm thinking $50 a square foot times 2,300 square feet, we're looking at a six-figure sum. And then tons of money scarcity really came up, right? Because now, as profitable as the short-term rental is, having to pay back a six-figure sum to repair and replace a deck would take years. I mean, just multiple years for the profits to pay that off. I was thinking that this was something, when I purchased the place, I knew that the inspector had said that there was potential that the deck would need serious work done, in about 5 years. And so I was thinking serious work was 20 to 30,000, and in a 5-year range, that was totally doable. But of course, with real estate investing, there can always be very expensive things that come up earlier than you think that it's going to come up. I already had to replace a roof on the short-term rental when my inspector, didn't think that there was a new roof imminent, and I ended up replacing that roof within the first year of purchase. So lots of things can come up with real estate investing. And of course, it just came up in a somewhat inopportune time, because now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like my emergency fund is only so much. I'm not going to have my physician income soon. How am I going to cover such a large amount? And so I've been spending time calling contractors, trying to find out what the scope really is. I'm still waiting to get bids back. I'm really hoping that what I found on the internet is really much higher. My short-term rental is in a relatively low cost of living area, so it's not like in California. So hopefully it's more around $25 a square foot. But yeah, just thinking about that deck still brings up anxiety. And I just keep telling myself, it's fine. We're going to figure it out. I mean, but I literally had thoughts of like, oh my God, I need to sell this place, but I probably can't even sell this place because any inspection is going to show the deck needs replacing. And then I will lose any appreciation I have, right? All that stuff comes up. And I have positive cash flow on here. I can keep holding it. I can find a way to pay for this deck. This is a problem that can be solved. I can find more ways of earning income. I can do locums work. So just reminding myself, like, I have the capacity to bring in money. My brain is my greatest asset. I just need to use it. All this medical training has given me a skill that demands high compensation, and I just need to find a place that is willing to compensate me for what I'm worth. It may mean hardship. It may mean being away from my husband for an extended amount of time if I do a locums jobs for a few months. It may mean working in a work situation that I don't necessarily want to be in, but it is temporary or can be temporary until I find the right situation. A lot of times it is worth waiting for the right situation because, moving between physician jobs is not necessarily so easy. Every time you work somewhere, there are places where when you credential, they want something from every previous workplace. So adding another workplace can add more time and effort in order to get credentialing as you keep moving forward. So I've been talking for quite a while now, but I hope you appreciate having a podcast like this where I'm really just sharing what I'm going through. And I hope by my sharing what I'm going through shows you that no matter how much you know coaching tools, how much you spend managing your mind, that you may still fall into times where you have money scarcity, where you fall into anxiety. And, this is where that saying that life is 50-50 is. No matter what you achieve, there are still going to be things that come up in life. A lot of people think they'll be happy when they achieve financial freedom or financial independence. And that number ends up often being a moving target because there's that scarcity feeling that comes back in of, well, what if this isn't enough? What if the market crashes and my nest egg is not enough to continue to support me? And it's constantly working on oneself to really examine those thoughts of scarcity, look at what are actual circumstances, what is fact, and what are just thoughts. And even if it is a circumstance of fact that's true, thinking it may not actually serve you. It may get you to a place that makes you feeling something where how you act from that feeling doesn't give you results you actually want or results that are of any benefit to you or actually results that are not good. So in those cases, not kind of pushing it out of the brain every time it comes in, being like, okay, brain, I know you want to keep stressing on that you see that it's a danger and a fear, but it's actually not useful. It's actually not helping us overcome and mitigate that risk. So we're going to not think about that now. We're going to get into the mode where we're going to think about how do we solve the problem that's at hand? How do we find ways of increasing income, of bringing in more income, or cutting expenses? How do we refocus so that we are able to actually take actions in order to move forward? How do we need to feel in order to be able to take those actions to move forward? What do we need to be thinking to feel that way? And that's really the basis of this kind of cognitive coaching. It's just really understanding that, yes, there are circumstances that happen in our life, but it's really how we think about it that creates how we feel about it. And we act based on how we're feeling, and how we act produce the results of our life. And so that's what in the life coach school, we call it the model. And that is what I found so powerful about coaching when I started learning about coaching, was when I really saw that, yes, how I'm thinking about this really does affect how I feel about it and what I'm able to do about it. And so reminding myself that when I'm getting into those thoughts of money scarcity, when I feel that money scarcity, I mean, money scarcity could be a thought. It could also be a feeling. When I have that anxiousness come up, what's going on in my mind? And what does this feeling have me producing? And if it's something that I don't want to be producing, then I can sit and feel that feeling and let it dissipate. But I can also really try to refocus and really stress things. It has to be a thought that I'm going to believe something is true. I believe that I will be fine. I believe that I will figure it out. I don't know what that looks like, but I can figure it out. And so that's where I go to. And that, when it comes to the deck, that's like, okay, let's figure out the next step. Let's figure out what the scope of the problem actually is. Let's get contractors. Let's get multiple contractors. Let's, talk to people about what needs to be done. Let's see where we can finance this. Let's see what contractors may offer financing, or where else money can come from in order to pay for this. And then when you get into that mode, then you can actually get results that you're looking for. So thanks so much for listening to me ramble today. And if you're having thoughts of money scarcity, just know that that's normal. And obviously, I do coach myself a lot on it, and I'd be happy to coach you on any money scarcity thoughts that you have. If that's of any interest to you, you can always sign up for a free consultation meeting with me at my website, www.growyourwealthymindset.com. Thanks for being a listener of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.